Welcome back to Beyond the Bottom Line. I'm your host, Bert Miller. And once again, I'm thrilled to have another terrific guest, Stacie Ruen. So just to tell you a little bit about Stacie, she joined General Motors in 2015 as an operational excellence master black belt, and she's responsible today for designing and implementing all the new programs that strengthen General Motors culture and helps the leaders and their team grow and align with the company strategy. Welcome to the show, Stacie.
Thanks, Bert. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So we were just talking the last time I saw you, we were on the streets in New York. After that meeting, you were getting ready to jump into an Uber, and it was getting ready to start to rain, and everybody's scrambling to try to grab a car. So that's the last time I saw you. So it's good to see that you've gone back to Michigan and done all the things that you've done over the last one. Now it's almost a year now since we saw each other.
Yeah, it's been a fabulous time, and honestly, the time in New York was awesome. Lots of great learnings, and able to take those learnings back to the company and continue our journey of improvement.
Absolutely, and by the way, for the listeners, Stacie did a tremendous presentation at the conference we were at. We were at the Hunt Scanlon conference in New York, and she did an outstanding job on her presentation. And the reason we kind of come together is I was looking for a place to sit over lunch, and there was an open chair, and I sat at the table with Stacie and some of her teammates, and I just was really, really impressed how she had passion around her role and the impact she knows that she's making every day at General Motors. So I thought she'd be a terrific guest here on Beyond the Bottom Line. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get started.
The rest is history, right?
The rest is history, absolutely. So can you just give me an example? You know, you've been talking, and part of your presentation in New York was how you really look to align new team members to the organizational values. And, you know, on many of these podcasts, many of the leaders we have talk about purpose and North Star and intention. You have done the same thing. And during the onboarding process with your team, give me an example of how it's positively impacted the people when they come into General Motors.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a company, and we think about the onboarding process, we've actually shifted the conversation from being an onboarding process to an onboarding experience. So the process is something that we from process owners really take into consideration. But as we focus primarily just on processes, that's where we generate silos for our employees. So what we've actually done is we've shifted the conversation less on process, more on experience. And it really is the first time or the first opportunity for us to connect with those new employees and help drive improvements for the organization. In new hire orientation, so on day one, we actually encourage our employees to not only align with our corporate behaviors, but to live them in their everyday life and make it a norm. So when they come back to the office, that's what they do. Personally and professionally, you'll hear our employees talk about being bold, being innovative, thinking customer, winning with integrity, looking ahead, one team, it's on me. And that's how we know that we've created that positive impact, not only for the company, but for the world we live in.
Absolutely. And so words do matter, right? I mean, you went from, shifting from process to experience, or from onboarding to experience. And so it's a little bit like, we've got away in the recruitment world. We've gotten away from using the word acquisition, talent acquisition. Nobody wants to be acquired. So we use talent access or whatever the case may be. So words do matter, and they do make a difference. As you're onboarding, it's really interesting from my perspective, 160, 170,000 people that you have in your organization. I think I'm in the ballpark that you oversee. How do you take what you've done in the onboarding when people join and the personal and professional that you mentioned that has to align with the company strategy? How do you help that cascade to your point where the team members actually feel like it's just part of their normal connective tissue to the organization versus just policies or mission statements and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so, as we see it, the onboarding experience is the first experience where we capture employees, right? But it's not just about them. It really is through the entire life cycle. So what we actually do is connect with each of our people leaders and ensure each of our people leaders are living our behaviors, walking our purpose, ensuring that we have the appropriate communication and consistent communication across the organization, all the way from Mary, all the way down to our contingent workforce. So communication is important, consistent messaging is important, and we actually leverage things like quick connects and one-on-ones to have true feedback where we provide real live conversations on what's working well and what's not working well, to ensure that one, we're living from a performance perspective and living aligned with our behaviors and purpose and values, and ensuring everybody across the organization does so.
Yeah, and I think the point you brought up is the consistent communication. So aside from what you oversee in your department, how do you, with that many folks, both in the all the way to the C-suite to your contingent workforce, how does the organization, is there a group of managers? How are you able to get that message and that the culture and the lens of where you're headed and the purpose? How are you able to get that to cascade in the organization throughout consistently?
Yeah, so I would say twofold, right? As we think about communication, it absolutely starts from the top. So our senior leadership team, they designed what the culture that they expect and the values that we lead. And then what we've actually implemented is a couple of things. So we have ERGs, and we have a group of individuals who are, we call them culture ambassadors or ambassadors of the culture. About 3,000 individuals across the entire organization that, whether they're leaders or whether they're not, they're advocates for the culture and ensuring that we're living that way. And then we also, connect with our HR partners across the organization, from our HR business leads all the way to our Center of Excellence and our GBS organization, to create that consistent message. So it really is about engagement. My team, I've got a very small team, but collaboration and influencing is the only way that we can absolutely manage 160,000 employees and ensure that that's consistent across.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask you in a second to give me an example of what you've done in terms of the collaboration and motivation, how it's manifested itself in within the organization. But before I do that, we talked a little bit about what your group does and what you've done, and over the last several months and last several years, you continue to improve yourself and become more certified in what you do and be able to take that back to the organization. Why do you think that is so important?
Yeah, so I would say for everything, right? Staying stagnant is not, it's not something that that will help drive us forward. So just like, what's happening in the industry, as we think about, even from a General Motors perspective, the vehicle as it was 100 years ago, and the needs that it provided 100 years ago versus what customers expect today in their vehicles has significantly changed. And so I would say it's the same thing from an employee perspective, that, the things that we learn, Bert, when you and I graduated from college, to me, it feels as though it was eons ago. The things that I learned back then aren't going to take me to the future. So I need to continuously be curious, understand what's happening out there in the organization, out there in the world, just to continue to bring that light to the broader organization. So now, heavy one right now, top of mind, is AI. How do we begin to integrate AI and the thoughts of AI into our learning and development programs? And how is AI impacting potentially our vehicles going forward? So how do we ensure that we upskill for the things that are not delighters or will be delighters for our customers in the future, that our customers don't know are delighters.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I want to stay with that point for a second, uh, because that we've been talking about that on many of the podcasts that I've been doing, including the one I did with Lisa and Coca-Cola, because that's the same topic that came up as the generative AI and the dynamics that you face in large organizations, whether it be a Coca-Cola or whomever, and especially a company the size of General Motors. How do you embrace the tech and the generative AI into your organization without the fear level of your team members wondering how that's going to affect them? And then what action steps have you taken to, if AI is going to do something of a different role in the organization, how do you take that individual? What do you guys have in place to upskill the individuals to take on new and exciting roles and develop their careers because of different technologies like AI?
Yeah, so I would say I'm going to say twofold. One, constant communication, right? We know it's coming. We know the components of AI is coming. As the organization transcends or transitions, it truly is that constant conversation to say, hey, we realize that it's changing, but here are some things that you can personally do to upskill yourself for the future, right? So even though AI might create our content in the future where they would replace the individual in a classroom setting, that doesn't mean that the individuals who are doing learning and development today aren't of value. They just have to upskill and continue to provide additional value. And so it's that conversation, right? That what you do today may not be what you do in the future. So the importance of continuing to upskill. And so what we do is we offer things like degreed pathways, kind of self-learning opportunities, the ability to get involved with ERGs, the ability to take on specific projects like a special project, get integrated with other teams. And to me, that becomes the power of learning other things that will help the individual grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, with the change and as we continue to go down this journey with generative AI and tech, that's actually going to create different roles. And I believe it's going to be net positive in the number of roles, depending on what source you have and you go to. Over the next 3 to 5 years, it's said that maybe we might lose 85 million roles, which really scares the heck out of a lot of people. But at the end of the day, we're also looking in anticipation of a 98 million roles created. So we have a net positive 12, 13 million roles. And again, this is all estimates and it depends on what source you go to. But I do believe we're going to be net positive when all this. It's going to be critical though, and you're doing such a great job at General Motors and others. Other folks are as well, by helping your people get out in front of this, embrace it, and allow them to upskill themselves so that they have a role. So that's fantastic. There's something I want to hear from you, because some of the feedback in our prep was fostering psychological safety that helps people become more innovative and creative and problem solving amongst the team members. Walk me through that and what that means for General Motors.
Yeah, so one of the things that we discovered along our journey from a culture perspective is the foundation for everything that we do, whether it's from a team, an organization, et cetera, it needs to start out with psychological safety. So we often hear about workplace safety. We often hear about product safety and the importance of those two components, but we can't forget about the human aspect of psychological safety. So once we all feel comfortable to truly have conversation, in real conversation, Bert, you and I you can say to me, hey, Stacie, that was horrible. And we have that open framework to have that conversation of being bold. That will then allow us to be bold, which will then allow us to become more innovative, which will then allow us to be more inclusive. So without that foundation of real life conversations, we go nowhere. So as an organization, even from a department perspective, as you can imagine, with 160,000 employees, multiple different departments, each of those departments are at, each of the individuals and each of the departments are at different levels within that journey of, do we have a psychologically safe space? And or, are we to the point where we can be bold with each other and, not have to be politically correct and just say things how it is? Or, we are in that innovative, we're gelling as a team, we're innovating, and we're continuing to push things forward. But without that foundation of psychological safety, it makes all of those other pieces very difficult to have.
That is so important for leaders that will watch this podcast, because by creating that environment and that safe environment for people to communicate with what I'd call radical candor or boldness, to be curious and not be afraid to push the boundaries or ask questions, that is so important. And if there is somewhat of a dispute, it's really around the why. If something is, if we're going to criticize something, give me the why, help me understand, and we can move forward. And it's about the topic, right? That's part of the safety is not attacking an individual. Part of the safety is really addressing whatever the situation might be to make whatever initiative you have underway be successful.
You got it. And, the other component and where leaders really need to take that step in. So I call it psychological safety and trust, right? They are two different components. So you can't force trust within your team members, but you can create that space in the environment to ensure that, you trust each other. If there's not that foundation of trust, you're already starting from a -1, and it will be much harder for you to be innovative as an organization.
That's a great point as well, Stacie, because when I think about trust, it's either 0 or 100. There's no, everything gets scored nowadays, and there's insights and KPIs, but trust and respect is 0 or 100. There's nothing in between. And so I think that is so important. What also is important for you, and I know it's a big part of how as you guys go through in your selection process at General Motors and the development of your team, is looking for those who have a high level of EQ, emotional quotient, so that they can have the ability to deal with various scenarios in the appropriate way. And the kind of what we were talking about with that psychological safety and being bold and candid and being willing to ask questions kind of falls under that EQ category. Tell me a little bit about how you guys evaluate your team and or help those with developing EQ and ensuring that as people go through the system, they're able to work with one another cross-functionally.
Yeah, so it's a constant journey, right? As you think about EQ and really, as we talked about previously, how do you continue to learn? So just because I learned about EQ today doesn't mean tomorrow that I should stop learning about it. So what we actually do is we have an assessment that currently we're doing with our leadership team, our senior leadership team, as well as those leaders below, really focusing on 9 leader competencies that fall into the bucket of thought leadership, people leadership, and business leadership. And so we're able to take a look at, from an end-to-end perspective, where our employees fall within those competencies, as well as what are those things that they get energy by. So whether it's being curious, whether it's being innovative, determined, etc. And then we take those and we leverage those parameters and say, okay, here's where you, Bert, can step in a little bit more, specific training associated with people leadership. So it's really customized training and coaching based on the needs of the individual, and partnering those individuals up with people who do it well. So if I have someone who has high EQ, I may partner them up with someone who does not have high EQ as a mentor or coach, so they can continue to learn and develop along the way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So walk me through your organization. Do you have a list of high potentials, hypos in your organization, and are there programs you bring into place where leadership brings them to your group, and you start to work on these programs that are very specific to the individual?
Yeah, so I would say it's twofold, right? One of the things that we've discovered as an organization is everyone has potential, but the question becomes is potential for what? So some individuals have potential to be managers, to be leaders, to be the senior leadership staff. And what we've actually done is we've developed programs in partnership with local schools as well as some internal, where we take those individuals who are captured as high potential as being people leaders or future leaders of the company. So we take them through an end-to-end view around what it looks like to be an effective leader. So that's from a people leader side of the house. The other component is, again, potential for what? Sometimes it's, we need technical expertise, and those individuals will go through specific technical training.
Absolutely. So as we get toward the end here, I said I'd come back and ask for an example. And what I'd really like to know is the innovation that you've incorporated in your department around the transformation and culture aspect of development of people. How has that shown itself through customer satisfaction, brand loyalty, performance on the field by the team? Can you give me an example of where that has come into play?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've discovered is our employees are also our customers. So whether they're coming into the organization, whether they're leaving the organization, we want to build customers for life. And our employees become a critical component of those customers. So the way that we engage our employees from the point of onboarding all the way to the point that that they leave the organization and we create a lasting impression. Each of those moments are moments that will help us retain our customers. And, having 160,000 employees, you can just imagine how many individuals that they speak to on a regular basis. So an individual begot individuals. So we really ensure that one, we focus on the experience within my team, focus on the experience within our employees, because that will have a positive and or a negative effect on ultimate customer satisfaction.
Well, yeah, not only internally with your team as a customer, but obviously, as you mentioned, they're customers of the products that you manufacture. So you have 160,000 people. Usually, families have two cars. Now you're 320,000 GM products, and then they have friends. It's just interesting how that can be just a compounding effect, right? So the goodwill and the development and having that like I said, the goodwill of your team, which are also your customers, is really, really important.
Yeah, and what we've discovered. So, I talked a lot about the onboarding side of the house, but offboarding or the lasting impression is even more important. And we know that that's working for a couple of different reasons. One, as we think about that offboarding, whether the individual, goes somewhere else, we do believe that they are true advocates for the products that we sell. And then two, as we think about that offboarding process, we've actually seen individuals who have been offboarded or who have left the organization, and they've come back as a part of a new hire. And I ask them quite often, hey, why did you decide to come back? And the answer is fairly consistent of, the experience that I had the last time that I was here was powerful. There's no other company that offers that. I felt as though I was unique and provided value. So I wanted to come back and be a part of this bigger thing than myself. So a lot of great things as we think about just the employee and how it's not it's not just about the onboarding component, but it truly is about all of the moments throughout their employee life cycle that impacts the way, one, that they feel, and then two, how they talk about it with others.
That is an incredible message to many companies out there. It's yes, when you bring people aboard, they come for a reason that, that's going to be the height of the moment, or from an emotional perspective, and how you onboard them. We talk about onboarding and how important onboarding is, and the consistency in communication and retention and all those things are very important. Continuity helps organizations continue to grow. And as important as that is, it's very important, particularly a company your size. It's so important when you're offboarding that experience, say, out the door, is still a positive experience. And also, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, personal and professionally, I mean, they may go someplace else, but they are able to go someplace else to, further their skill set and career because of the things that they learned and gained from General Motors and the way you guys operate. And I think that's very, very important when people do leave the organization. So leaders out there, offboarding is just as important for your brand. And I mentioned this the other day on another podcast. We're so good at consumer branding. Sometimes we kind of forget about the hiring branding. And the hiring branding is both on the way in and on the way out. So that's a tremendous point, Stacie. All right. I asked most of my guests this question. Who really in your life influenced you the most? I mean, I know we have multiple influences and we have our heroes or whatever the case may be, but who is your single most influential person that's impacted you, your career, and where you sit today?
Yeah, I would say a mentor from my past. It was that individual. So I started my career, I was in the tax department. I went from tax to be in operational excellence, doing a lot of things within the organization. And then I had the opportunity to become a master black belt. And it was one individual who actually believed in me, that throughout the process said, I want Stacie to be a part of this conversation. Yet the individual had some tough love feedback for me, in that, hey, I just want to be very blunt with you. I was here, I stood up for you, but you need to try 10 times harder than what you may have in the past. And based on that and some of the other mentors that I've had along the way, and me, I'm not you only have one mentor. I have multiple different mentors that I really appreciate and respect, different aspects of their style that I've taken into my leadership style. But that, I would say, that individual and that mentor was a pivotal point for me in my career to really allow me to know that I can do anything that I want or that I strive to do, but I need to put in the effort to ensure that I do it. Subsequently from that, I've actually taken that and said, I need to do the same for my people, right? How do I believe in them? I need to believe in them, allow them to fail and fail fast, but still be in their corner to help elevate them to be the best that they can be.
Absolutely. So that's something you picked up and you're now carrying on. I'm sure people are learning from you right now that they'll carry on. The part about a mentor and tough love, it's done the right way. And for those individuals who do have the EQ, you receive that tough love when it's very respectful, because they're trying to make you better. And certainly that inflection point in your life at that moment, that couple of years, however long it was very important to you. And you may not have known it at the time, but now you can look back and see how that is, declared itself over the last few years. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. And I would say, oftentimes when we receive that tough love or that feedback, it hurts at the time, right? For any of us, it's, you hear it and it's like, oh, and your initial instinct is to be like, oh, man, did you hear what Bert said to me? That's absolutely not correct. But if we take the step back and we think about it from the framework of Moments create beliefs, beliefs drive behavior, and behavior impacts results. Those moments and how we impact or how we react to those moments help us with our long-term trajectory as professionals, both professionally and personally.
Yeah. So for the younger folks out there still in their career ascension, I mean, when we stop being works in progress, right, Stacie, and you get to a point where you start looking in the mirror and you can be your own critic as well. Or I guess even more important, you're really honest with yourself. And when you're honest with yourself, that hurts as well. That's how you continue to improve. And when we stop working on ourselves, we're kind of done. And so I'm glad you've been able to learn that. You're fostering that at General Motors. I'm sure hundreds, if not thousands of folks there have really benefited from your program. Really appreciate you being on the bottom line. Thank you very much, Stacie.
Thank you, Bert.
This is Beyond the Bottom Line. I'm your host, Bert Miller, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.